Good afternoon. It's so great to be in community with you all. My name is Jorge Fontanez. I'm a proud board member of Financial Health Network since January of 2025. This is my first time at Emerge, and I've learned so much over the last 2 days. And I'm really excited to be here with our esteemed panelists to talk about a topic that I think has already been part of the conversations. I hear a lot about what it has meant to get to this point in financial health related to access. And I'm also hearing really high interest in regards to solutions. This panel is about the choices we make in design and how we can get to that place where financial health for all is possible. Let me start with just some grounding on a personal level. Just less than 2 years ago, I moved back to my hometown of Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is known for a lot of things, cheesesteaks included, pretzels as well, which are my favorite. But for decades, Philadelphia also had the label of the poorest city in America. And it most recently shed that title. And it sounds like progress, but when you start to look at the data, we see statistics that the poverty rate amongst Black and Latino households still remains high. And that amongst Latino residents especially, that number is 33%. The gap is also still nationwide. This work is meaningful and has been long for us to see the progress that we are all imagining. 5.6 million households across the country are unbanked, 19 million underbanked, with 1 in 5 living on the margins. There are social safety nets for households, but some $80 billion in public benefits still have yet to go unclaimed every year. Why? Because the systems feel or are designed as too complex and hard to navigate. And when you look at the tax to communities, some $450 million a year in excess interest is extracted from Black and Latino borrowers. And that's being exacerbated today through algorithms, not necessarily because of fraud. Exclusion in a system like the one we're navigating is rarely dramatic. It comes in the shape of ordinary decisions that organizations make every day. Identity verification, variable income, the ability for your rent to help you qualify for a credit score. In this community, I feel as though we all agree on at least 2 things. There is a moral imperative to get to financial health for all, and we also believe that the business case and the business opportunity exist. Yet there are underserved markets and organizations that are leaving this opportunity still on the table. Today, we're going to get past the what and the how, and hopefully get past the what, but talk more about the how in the design solutions, and maybe also about the who in the equation. On this stage today, we'll have 3 distinct vantage points. A credit union that was built for inclusion from the beginning, before the law required it. A national organization that makes reaching underserved communities a clear priority. And a community organization who's on the ground with families that can help us bring this data to life. And so let's start here. In fact, Arianna, I'd like to start with you and invite each of you to talk about what does access as a design choice mean for you? And what do you still see organizations treating with regards to access? How does that feel more like an afterthought still today?
When I hear access as a design choice, first and foremost, I think it's a choice. And if it's a choice, that means we can choose differently. We can update our systems. We oftentimes are in this community where we have a lot of assumptions, right? But people are complex, and everyone's their own personal financial systems, right, that they have for themselves. And I personally would feel like it's complex. We're all humans, and we need to be able to have systems that work for each individual. And so if we're operating off of these assumptions that our people are all financially stable and have consistent income, if we're assuming that everyone's comfortable working in a financial institution space, then oftentimes we're going to inadvertently exclude individuals just based on those natural assumptions. And so what we need to do is look at how are we able to support everyone in our community, and that doesn't happen alone. It happens with institutions in a community working together, working with their community partners, and really working to understand what are those basic barriers that we have and how do we work together to achieve those.
Thank you. So Matt, from your vantage point then, talk to us about access as a design choice and how it manifests.
Sure. At JPMorganChase, we want to be the bank for any customer. And frankly, we want any customer, every customer, whether banking, investing, or lending, to meet their financial goals with confidence, with convenience. And if that's your goal, you have to tackle access at the start and as a design choice, as you said, Arianna.
And so, Emi, how about you?
You know, I had prepared all these notes for this panel today, and then I've heard all these incredible conversations today that has reaffirmed that you are all the choir. And recently, I had a chance to listen to Representative Presley, who said, "I am preaching to the choir today because I need you all to sing." And I think that's such an incredible message. And so I think one of the things that came to mind to me listening to the earlier panel this morning, I think it was Jay who talked about how his bank is now looking at so many more factors when determining underwriting. And as someone who has worked in the CDFI industry for the last 8 years, it's been one of the biggest things we've advocated for, right? We're like, CDFIs, look at the whole picture. We look at rent, we look at their community and all these things. And it's so exciting to hear banks start to talk about that as well. And at the same time, I think about our client base. We serve predominantly Latinos, predominantly immigrants, and right now is not the time to be seen, right? And so when we're designing all these new financial tools about how do we increase accessibility, how do we increase visibility, how do you do that with a population that doesn't feel that increased accessibility and increased visibility is in their interest or in their safety and for the safetiness of their community? And so I think that's one of the things that I really think about when we're designing programs right now or talking to other banks and partners about the solutions that we're designing. It's with that in mind, right? It's always been hard to do the work that we do, but it's particularly hard right now, and we need to talk about that openly so that when we design these new tools and we pilot new initiatives, we're considering that.
I'm going to come back to you on safety as a consideration now, as a design, part of a design thinking exercise. But Arianna, just to start with the credit union as an example, we were talking about how you serve parts of Michigan as well as Illinois, and your process, as I understand it, is that you start with defining the community you want to serve, engaging them in the design of those products and services. Give us an example. What's one example of a design or service choice that you've made that's been informed by this goal of expanding access?
One example that stands out to me is our ATM accessibility. So in 2014, MSUFCU was one of the first credit unions nationwide that implemented voice output for individuals who are visually impaired. And the unique part about that is we didn't do it because it was mandated at that time or a compliance risk, right? We did it because of a board member. So Mike Hudson was on our board since 2012, and he was a strong advocate for those who are disabled and expanding that accessibility, and also had the personal side as he is a blind individual. And so by having him at the table making the decisions, we were able to understand that was something that we needed to update. And so we were able to achieve that, and the outcome was twofold. One, we learned that when you have that person at the table, you're able to really acknowledge where are those accessibility gaps. But two, when you make those adjustments, it actually makes the product better for all members.
That's such a powerful example, because one of my takeaways is how important representation is in boardrooms. I've heard the conversations around what it means to shift power, and so having that representation at that level to influence your strategy seems to have helped you get there. I mean, I want to come back to you then now as you think about, I mean, you've already expressed the needs of the community, the concerns around safety. Yeah, talk to us more about what do you see the communities expressing they need most right now?
I think one of the things that we run the danger when we think about AI tools is like, it's all about efficiency, right? But if we remember, a lot of the AI tools that exist right now have existed for a long time, predominantly to serve the disabled community, right? Transcription software or translation software, anything that would, write down things for you. And I think if we continue to think about AI as a tool for accessibility, then that needs to be the priority in understanding the different needs, that having one tech solution isn't a solve-all. Underserved communities isn't a monolithic group within underserved. There are many different subsets of that. And some folks do need increased visibility, and we need to increase how we incorporate different factors into their underwriting, and other folks don't. And I think what's particularly interesting right now is that there are so many tools that we've told our community to work towards that are now being stripped away, right? Like, our goal is to get your business more bankable, and then you can get an SBA loan, et cetera. And then SBA loans are removed as a tool for our community, right? Or homeownership. And, I remember reading, I don't know if everyone here knows, but last year HUD made 9902 data public, which is the demographic information for housing counseling agencies. And at first I was very excited because it showed that my organization is like one of the top housing counseling agencies in my region, right? And I always knew we were crushing the competition. Sorry, I mean partners. But I was super excited, right? Like, now I had the data to back my ego and my stance. And then, I thought about the fact that Unidos released data last year that said 70% of net new homeowners in the next 20 years will be Latino. And all these things are very exciting to me, and I think it's great. And then the new HUD NOFO comes out, and it says that it will no longer fund pre-purchase housing counseling. And it's a stark reminder that accessibility and design can be inclusionary or exclusionary, right? And some of these new programs are designed specifically to exclude certain folks, right? We see these things, and so for me, when I think about the programs that we design, it's no longer how do we get people ready for tools that have existed and exist. It's we got to rethink the entire game here and think about solutions that we haven't really thought about before. And I think you guys are much smarter than me and can figure out those solutions, because I don't quite have them yet, but we need to work together to figure it out.
I think that's what this community is all about. And so Matt, I'm curious, I mean, we've heard now from both Arianna and Emi speaking from a more local and regional perspective, and you have the advantage of being able to scale banking, financial service products, and I wonder how this complexity manifests and how does it look different in an organization like yours? How are you, and how does what Emi and Arianna sharing resonate with the work that you're doing?
Well, first, it's humbling, so let's start there. One of the things that we think about a lot is that we cannot serve customers deeply and at scale by looking at averages. You just can't. But by the way, I might offer it's hard to build a long-term sustainable business at scale looking at averages. And therefore, what I mean is we spend a lot of time looking at outliers and looking at friction points and even looking at those moments of delight that confuse us. Like, why is that delightful? So that's number one, right? We start by de-averaging. And then second, we spend a lot of time listening to customers and prospective customers and learning from them what their unmet needs are. And potentially, what are as yet emerging segments that we have not yet solved for, that we are not fully meeting the needs for. And so I think a good example of how we've been able to do that at scale is our branch network. So on the Chase side of JPMorganChase, we have about 5,000 branches in the lower 48 states. And this year, we're opening another 160 plus branches in over 30 states. Choosing the real estate, choosing the position for those branches was an access decision.
The locations.
The specific locations. How are we serving those communities, and why might they need a Chase branch or not there? And then you couple that with our community manager program. Last year did over 14,000 programs in their communities, right? Serving, not selling, and delivering for our communities where we heard the need. And so I'll close by saying we are so lucky at scale to have this sort of virtual cycle of branches and community managers where we can listen to the customer, to the prospective customer, to the community member, and then feed that into what aren't we doing enough of.
I learned a lot in the breakout sessions, and thanks to Ashley and Meg for facilitating a FinX workshop that members get to experience. It was my first time, and one of the statistics that they pointed out was some 20 million households or Americans, someone will correct me, are living in bank deserts, that branches do still matter in having a presence. But Matt, let's stay with your conversation and focusing on data and how you segment your customer base as a means to design for access. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, in many ways, it comes back to many things I've said about listening and looking at the outliers and starting with the customer and the community member. So maybe let's pivot a bit to the topic of this morning about how new data tools of the future will enable or disable access. I won't reiterate what you all heard on the main stage this morning. I'm bullish on AI and specific agentic AI, really in two places, in terms of meeting customers where they are. One is access, right? We can provide access today, but boy, it's really hard because we need to know so much about a given customer. It's very heavy, it's very expensive, it takes a really long time at scale at a national bank. How might agentic AI use unstructured data to find out things about new slices of a population, indeed an individual person, right? To provide access at scale that we could never do today, right? That to me is one enormous opportunity to agentic AI. And the other one, frankly, is on protection, right? We all know, right, that protection lives at that nexus of like security and convenience, right? We can make you more secure if we add a lot more friction, right? Like it's really hard to nail that balance, protect the customer, but do so in a convenient way. I think that using new data sources through agentic AI will be able to, at scale, by customer or by segment, be able to provide protection that is not annoying and that is not filled with friction, that is necessary to keep us safe as it is today.
I mean, we promised to talk about solutions, but you also said to me backstage that you feel like you spend so much of your days focusing on the problems. And I'm curious, kind of building on what Matt just shared, from the community perspective, like you're hearing about the opportunities from automation and how we can build risk-based systems to kind of manage out risk potentially, improve the access for families and small businesses. What are you hearing from communities? How are they resonating with this new technology, specifically AI?
Yeah. I think last year Stanford released data on the state of Latino entrepreneurship. They update this every year. And it reaffirmed that Latino entrepreneurs are using AI at the same rate as white entrepreneurs. And that sounds really great, but it makes me very nervous because the digital divide still exists, right? Like we all have abuelitas who are all of a sudden sending us YouTube videos of just very obviously fake to me, but not to them, right? And the rate at which this is coming out is just so fast, right? I think I read that 86% of Latinos now get 100% of their news from social media. That's terrifying, right? And so it's one of those things that we see many more folks, and actually I think about a client recently. We were doing a Latinx in business training in Baltimore City, and we had a 72-year-old business owner sign up for our class, or our cohort, because he wants to increase marketing for his duct cleaning business, events, so that his kids are more drawn to taking over the business. And I was so moved by that, and also felt so embarrassed because I'm very slow to adapt AI, or at least knowingly. And it's really telling that the desire to use AI is very much there, right? And what matters is really that we ensure that there's safety nets or guardrails in that process. And I think organizations like LEDC, those local organizations are really, it's never been more important for us to be present and like adaptive to these things. When I think about, I want to commend JPMorganChase in Baltimore. They've been opening up more branches, but they also opened a call center, right? And so they recognize that Baltimore also needs more jobs. And they're coming in and creating more jobs and increasing accessibility by creating more branches in the community. And they're funding a lot more projects in that work. And so I think that for me, it's important that we don't just think about these next tech solutions, because it has to be much larger than that, right? And there are some folks who believe that all this AI thing is actually going to push us closer to humans. Eventually, we'll see how long that takes, but eventually we're going to miss that connection, right? And I think some of the institutions that are really ensuring that they're setting solutions in both ways, these physical locations and these technological solutions, are the ones that are going to be most embraced by our community.
So Arianna, Emi's helping us kind of understand how high the adoption rate of AI is amongst Latino communities. And so when you and the credit union are thinking about testing and designing for some of the guardrails that were talked about this morning, fairness, transparency, trust in adoption of new technologies or risk frameworks, talk to us about how you're designing for that.
Yeah. When I think about trust, it makes me think that trust doesn't happen when a product or service works for most people. It works when there's a solution that works for all people, and that's really where you're going to build that trust. And until we can get to that point where there is an access point in. And I think there's a couple key factors that go into that. One is transparency. So we want to be able to be clear with the members that we're serving of, why is this the decision? Why is this the best option for you? And if it's not, if that's not something we're able to offer, we want to make sure that there's that educational piece. And then I also think there is that diversifying the products. And it makes me think of our checking accounts, right? We have 4 different kinds of checking accounts because all of our members are at different places. And so it really comes with ensuring that there is solutions for each type of member to make sure you can meet them right where they are.
Matt, do you want to comment on how you're building in guardrails in the systems?
Yes, but I'd even more like to, because I feel like JPMorganChase is getting a lot of attention on this panel, and I want to tell you we don't always get it right. For years, to that point, we had a product on the shelf called college checking. Great for 18 to 24-year-olds if you happen to be in college. And it was the only product that we had that had some sort of age-based waiver, right? And only 40% of 18 to 24-year-olds were enrolled in school, folks, right? So we were unreal, and we didn't realize we were doing this, but we were, in fact, cutting out 60% of the 18 to 24-year-old population from a essentially monthly service fee-free product. Now, to the theme, we wouldn't, I hope, be all up here. If we didn't want to take action, we wouldn't be in this room if we didn't want to take action. So we recently have added an age-based waiver on our Bank On product and actually stopped sold college checking to fix this problem, but we don't always get it right, and it requires us listening.
Yeah. So, Emi, I want to come back to you. I think now we're getting to the point where we really want to get to the solutions and also reimagine, like, what is the financial health system look like? Your work is grounded in helping Latino families and entrepreneurs build wealth, right? Build financial stability, be able to manage the volatility and the shocks that all of us have experienced at some point. What are the ways that financial systems you think should be re-envisioned to center the communities that you're serving today?
Yeah, I think right now we are sort of doubling down with our in-person support in folks. And, I think one of the things for us is we need to stop assuming that we understand and everything that the community needs because it's just so tricky right now. And a couple of months ago, or almost a year ago now, we designed a program for federally laid off workers in DC. And so we thought, okay, 100,000 people have been laid off. Obviously, a lot of them are going to want to move to entrepreneurship. And so we designed a program, we got funding for it. And I think the first one, we had like 200 plus folks sign up. And then it was like double digits. It just quickly dwindled. And it became so obvious that what folks wanted was their jobs back, right? And not necessarily switch to entrepreneurship, right? We've talked about entrepreneurship as necessity for underserved community members for so long, but it's out of necessity for so many folks that have been part of the workforce for so long. And I think for us, we talked about mistakes. We've made so many mistakes in our programming in the last 7 years, and right now we're analyzing all of them, right? So my organization, called Latino, we've always served everyone, but historically, 65 to 70% of our clients were Latino. And during the pandemic, my organization was fortunate enough to be responsible for managing a lot of COVID-related funding. We dispersed $145 million in under 3 years through 16 different grant programs. And when we looked at the demographics from that, the percentage of our clients that received grant funding from us was 20%, right, the Latinos. So we had gone from 75% Latino to 20% Latino. And that happened because our intention or priority became, we're going to serve all underserved. We just want to get this money out there as quickly as possible. And what we did not stop to analyze was the inclusivity aspect of that design work, right? We didn't look at the applications with what questions we were asking. And now when there's so much more guidance about all the different and additional questions we need to ask in applications, it's one of those things that we are much more intentional about. It's not just sending links, but it's having conversations about why we're asking for certain things. Where is that information going to go? And we've had some clients who are like, why are you asking me that? And some clients who are like, I'm so grateful that you're asking me that because it means you care about the whole picture and you really want to stay with us throughout our financial journey. And so I think, I already forgot the start of your question. And hopefully I got to it, but really, I think the message I'm trying to get across here is that it's really going to take us being honest about what's working or not working, and especially I think we have so much data over the last couple of years about what did work, and then ensuring that as we have tools that develop solutions so much quicker, that we're also quicker about shutting it down when it's clearly not working, and then shifting and pivoting to something that will potentially, hopefully, work better.
You did answer the question. So in centering the communities,
yes.
right? I mean, we've been talking a bit about the role of technology and AI, but I'm walking away right now with the theme of supporting humans with humans. So we're going to wrap up, and as we do, feel free to kind of build on what Emi has been sharing as we think about what is actionable, right? What can we do from our specific vantage point and our platforms in the organizations that we serve? And I want to ask as we close, what is one mindset shift or design decision that you feel you can make or that we can make as a community to design and build financial health for all? I'll start with you, Arianna.
Thank you. I think to piggyback off of what Emi said, answering humans with humans, right? And one thing that we've implemented at the credit union the last 2 years was a new financial education product. So I think that's something that we haven't talked about a ton on this panel, but I've heard it across this conference, is how do we make sure that there is the resources available, but not only are those resources available, but also that you're reaching the community. And so we started a program called the Culture of Finances, which was created specifically for the underbanked and the underserved. And it's a 3-month program where if they stick with us for those 3 months, take all 6 classes, do homework and quizzes, then we're able to offer a different kind of service, right? And we're building that trust along the way because a big gap that we have is the trust in financial institutions. And so when it comes to meeting humans with humans, it's also making sure that you're taking the time to really have that direct support and build that trust along the way. And I think to wrap up, what to really focus on and that solution focused is making sure you have the right person in the room. So we didn't just have a bunch of people in the room say, I think we're missing the underbanked, right? It was, 2 years of research, of reaching out to that community. Why don't you bank with us? Why don't you have a bank account? What do you want to hear? What don't you know? And we made a really intentional program and intentional products with that program.
Matt, how about you? Closing thoughts.
Yeah, on the word all really struck me, given what Arianna and Emi have talked about. And so maybe I would say, as an inspiration for all of us, let's not build for all, let's build for each.
Yes.
That was good.
Personalization.
I don't want to go after
Personalization.
We're going to end with that.
Someone want to trademark that from Matt? Yeah. Got some team members working on it right now. Yeah, good, Emi.
I really can't beat that. And I think, honestly, it's going to take collaboration. All these tools that we're working on, I joked earlier about crushing my competitors, or partners, sorry. But I really think it's going to take all of us to be much more collaborative about developing these tools. You know, my organization has implemented 3 underwriting softwares in my 7 years at the organization, and I've offboarded 4. And so it's a time where we really need to talk about solutions or new solutions in a much more collaborative way than we have in the past.
Well, thank you all for sharing your wisdom with us, and thank you for spending time listening to how we might get to a future that looks better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.